What does it mean when someone you know becomes your executioner? In the harsh reality of Houston streets, trust can be a deadly currency, and broad daylight offers no protection from those who've made violence their trade. Today, we're diving deep into a case that shows just how thin the line between familiarity and fatal danger can be. For those of you who appreciate detailed crime analysis and want to explore more about gang-related violence in Houston, you'll find extensive resources on therealcrimediary.com. In November 2020, as the world grappled with a global pandemic, a man named Demetrius Daniels pulled into a familiar parking lot, unaware that death was lurking between the dumpsters. His killer wasn't a stranger. It was someone he knew, a documented member of the Black Disciples gang. But what drives someone to orchestrate such a calculated execution in plain view? That's what we'll uncover today. November 5th, 2020 dawned like any other day in Houston, with the constant hum of traffic along the Sam Houston Tollway serving as the city's heartbeat. The intersection of Beechnut Street, usually alive with morning commuters and locals going about their daily routines, would soon become the stage for a calculated act of violence. The 9700 block of Beechnut Street might seem unremarkable at first glance. It's the kind of place you'd drive past without a second thought. A typical Houston parking lot surrounded by local businesses, with dumpsters lined against one side. On any given morning, you might see people grabbing coffee, heading to work, or meeting friends. The kind of place where nobody expects tragedy to unfold. That morning, as temperatures climbed and the clock approached 10 a.m., the parking lot was relatively quiet. The pandemic had changed the rhythm of the city, creating an eerie calm that seemed to hang in the air. Security cameras silently recorded as cars came and went, their footage capturing the mundane moments that would soon become crucial evidence in a murder investigation. What those cameras revealed was a scene straight out of a nightmare. One man lying in wait, hidden between those everyday dumpsters, while another approached, completely unaware that this ordinary November morning would be his last. The stage was set for a crime that would shake the local community and reveal just how vulnerable we all are, even in the most familiar places. At the heart of this tragic story are two men whose paths would cross fatally that November morning. Broderick Jamal Sales, known on the streets as Foolie, was no stranger to law enforcement. At 37 years old, he was a documented member of the Black Disciples, a notorious street gang whose influence stretches across the nation. The kind of person who, despite multiple run-ins with the law, somehow always managed to remain on the streets. When we look at Sales's life leading up to that day, we see a pattern of escalating violence and disregard for the law. He was already out on bond for a string of serious offenses: car theft, home burglary, illegal possession of firearms, and drug charges involving crack and methamphetamine. But what drives someone to graduate from these crimes to premeditated murder? On the other side of this story was 28-year-old Demetrius Daniels. Both men were familiar faces in the area around that parking lot, a detail that makes what happened next even more chilling. They knew each other, shared the same spaces, possibly even exchanged greetings on previous occasions. This wasn't a random act of violence between strangers. This was personal. The parking lot where their final encounter would take place was more than just a location. It was territory they both knew well. A seemingly ordinary space that held significance for both men, though we may never fully understand what tensions or conflicts led to that fateful morning. What we do know is that one man came prepared to end the other's life, turning this everyday location into a scene of premeditated violence. The surveillance footage tells a chilling story of calculated murder in broad daylight. At around 10 a.m., when most people were going about their regular morning routines, Sales arrived at the parking lot with deadly intentions. The video captures him methodically choosing his position, ducking between dumpsters where he could remain hidden while maintaining a clear view of the entrance. For anyone watching the footage now, the premeditation is unmistakable. Minutes ticked by as Sales waited patiently in his makeshift blind. Then Daniels arrived, completely unaware of the danger lurking just feet away. He pulled into the lot and backed his car into a parking spot, a routine action he'd likely performed countless times before. The choice of parking spot, tragically close to the dumpsters, sealed his fate. The next moments unfolded with horrifying swiftness. Sales emerged from his hiding spot, weapon already drawn. There was no confrontation, no chance for Daniels to defend himself or even comprehend what was happening. The shots rang out in quick succession, shattering the morning calm. Daniels never had the opportunity to leave his vehicle, dying there behind the wheel of his car. What makes this attack particularly disturbing is how brazenly it was carried out. This wasn't under cover of darkness or in a secluded location. This was morning in Houston, with businesses open and people going about their daily lives. The surveillance camera captured it all, including a moment when Sales looked directly into the lens, seemingly unconcerned about leaving behind evidence of his actions. After the shooting, he simply walked away, leaving behind a scene of devastation that would forever change many lives. What would unfold in the aftermath of this brutal murder would reveal a disturbing pattern of escalating violence and criminal behavior. At the time of Daniels' murder, Sales was already free on bond, facing charges for auto theft, home burglary, and drug possession. But perhaps most concerning was his possession of a firearm, a clear indication that the system's safety nets had failed to prevent this tragedy. The investigation into Daniels' murder faced unprecedented challenges as the world grappled with COVID-19 lockdowns. Evidence processing slowed, witness interviews became complicated by social distancing protocols, and the usual investigative procedures had to be completely reimagined. It would take nearly a year before investigators could gather enough evidence to charge and arrest Sales. But even more shocking than the delays was Sales's behavior while investigators built their case. Rather than laying low, he continued his crime spree with seemingly increasing boldness. In April of the following year, just 5 months after Daniels' murder, Sales was involved in another shooting at a gas station, this time firing into a crowd in broad daylight. This incident led to additional charges of evading arrest, aggravated assault, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. What we see here is a pattern of escalating violence that shows absolutely no regard for human life. Here was someone who, knowing he had already taken a life, showed no remorse and continued to put others in danger. Each new charge added to a growing portfolio of violence that painted a clear picture of an individual who posed an ongoing threat to public safety. In the end, justice would prevail in a Harris County courtroom. The surveillance footage proved to be the smoking gun that prosecutors needed, showing Sales looking directly into the camera, an unmistakable identification of the killer. For an hour before the shooting, his movements were tracked, leaving no doubt about his deliberate intentions that fatal morning. The jury was presented with overwhelming evidence of a calculated ambush. This wasn't a crime of passion or a split-second decision. This was a methodical execution carried out by someone who had carefully chosen his moment. The prosecution masterfully demonstrated how Sales had essentially stalked his victim, lying in wait before launching his deadly attack. After careful deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict, and Sales was sentenced to 55 years in prison. This sentence means he must serve at least half of his time before even being considered for parole, a small comfort to a community that had lived in fear of his escalating violence. For Daniels' family, while no sentence could bring back their loved one, the verdict represented a crucial step toward healing and closure. The case sent a powerful message throughout Houston, that even in the midst of a global pandemic, justice would not be deterred. That message resonated particularly strongly in neighborhoods where gang violence had become all too familiar, offering hope that change is possible when communities stand together against violence. As we reflect on this chilling case from Houston's streets, we're confronted with the harsh reality of how gang violence tears at the fabric of our communities. This wasn't just about one life lost. It was about the ripple effect that sends shockwaves through families, neighborhoods, and entire cities. What would drive someone to hide between dumpsters on an ordinary November morning, waiting to ambush another human being? And how many more stories like this play out on our streets every day? These are the questions that keep us searching for answers, that drive us to understand the deeper complexities of criminal behavior and justice. For those of you who want to dive deeper into cases like this, including exclusive insights and detailed analysis of gang-related crimes in America, you'll find extensive resources at therealcrimediary.com. Next time, we'll take you inside another gripping case that challenges everything you think you know about loyalty and betrayal. Until then, remember that behind every headline is a human story waiting to be told. Hey listeners, welcome back to The Real Crime Diary. I'm your host, Sean Dupree. If you tuned in last time, we had a deep dive into the disturbing history of power abuse across different eras, looking at the connection between dominance, control, and how it plays out even today. We touched on scandals from the past and compared them with some modern-day examples, showing how these patterns of abuse, unfortunately, persist. One of the most insightful tools we've explored to understand this is my book, Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's not just a historical account, but an interdisciplinary approach to understanding why this keeps happening. We draw from history, philosophy, and modern case studies to explain how figures like Dominique Pellico, Harvey Weinstein, and others have exploited their positions of power for their own gain, often protected by the very systems meant to stop them. Recap of last interaction. In our last live stream, we discussed how libertinism, philosophically introduced by figures like Marquis de Sade, has shaped the way power and pleasure have been entangled throughout history. This concept ties directly into how figures like Weinstein operated, as we saw parallels between de Sade's fictional characters and the way powerful men manipulated their victims in real life. You guys had some amazing comments, asking how societal structures have allowed these behaviors to go unchecked for so long. It's a crucial question, and one that the book addresses deeply. Why this book is valuable. Now, what's powerful about Power, Pleasure, and Pain is its ability to break down these historical patterns and link them to the present. You're not just reading about ancient Rome or Enlightenment philosophy, you're seeing how these ideologies are alive today. The book uncovers how sexual violence and control have been systematically woven into the fabric of societies from ancient times right up to the modern era. It's about understanding not just the individual predators, but the systems that protect them. Whether it's in royal courts, religious institutions, or today's corporate and entertainment worlds. Through these historical lenses, we also explore movements like #MeToo that are beginning to dismantle these structures. The fight for justice is far from over, but as the book demonstrates, we are in the midst of a cultural shift where legal reforms are finally addressing these long-standing issues. It's more than a history lesson. It's a guide to understanding and supporting change today. What's next? If you want to dive deeper, I suggest picking up Power, Pleasure, and Pain, a study of abuse through time. It's available now, and trust me, it will change the way you think about power, pleasure, and control. We've even got some exclusive content coming up on the channel where we'll be exploring the book's case studies in even more detail, so stay tuned for that. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to The Real Crime Diary so you don't miss any updates. Let's keep this conversation going, because understanding the past is key to changing the future.